The little girl had been holding her breath for what felt like hours. She could hear the loud shouts and the crashing of objects from the next room. Her heart was pounding so fast it felt like it might burst out of her chest. Every time she heard the heavy footsteps and the angry voice, she pressed herself tighter into the corner of the small hallway, hoping that somehow she would become invisible. But invisibility was not real, and deep down, she knew it was just a matter of time before something even worse happened. She was only 9 years old, but the fear she carried felt much heavier than a child's heart should ever bear. She had seen it happen too many times before. The bruises, the tears, the loud arguments that shook the walls and made the air feel thick with anger and pain. She had tried to be strong for her mother, tried to pretend that she did not notice the fights, but it was impossible. Every time he raised his hand or shouted, she felt her stomach twist into knots and she wanted to scream. But her voice always got stuck somewhere deep inside. That evening, everything felt worse than usual. Maybe it was the way he had been drinking all day. Or maybe it was just one of those nights when anger seemed to consume him completely. She had been in her room trying to read a book to distract herself, but the sounds coming from the living room made it impossible to focus. The yelling turned into banging, and then a sharp crack echoed through the house. That sound was the one she had been dreading, and it made her stomach drop to her toes. She knew exactly what it meant. He was hitting her mother again. She froze, her small hands gripping the edges of the book. She could hear her mother crying, a soft sound that broke her heart every time. Her own eyes were starting to sting with tears, but she swallowed them quickly. Crying wouldn't help. Hiding wouldn't help. She needed someone to know what was happening, someone who could come and save them. But who would listen to a little girl? Who would take her seriously? Then she remembered the old phone her mother kept in the kitchen drawer. It wasn't used much anymore, mostly just for emergencies. She had seen her mother leave it there, charging, and sometimes she had played with it when her mother wasn't looking. The idea came to her suddenly, almost like a whisper in her mind. She could text someone. Someone might help. But who would she send it to? She had no friends she could trust, no relatives nearby who would take it seriously. She scrolled through the contacts list, her little fingers shaking. And then, almost by accident, she found a stranger's number she had seen in a comment under one of her mother's old social media posts. She didn't know who they were, but they seemed kind. Maybe they could help. Her hands were trembling as she typed the message. Every letter felt heavy, every word a risk. She had to be fast, but she also had to be careful. She typed slowly, almost whispering each word to herself. He's beating my mom again. She read it over once, her heart beating faster with fear and hope. Could she really send this? Could someone really come to help them? She pressed the send button before she could change her mind, immediately after sending the message. She pressed herself further into the corner and held her breath. She listened, listening for footsteps, listening for the sound of someone breaking through the door, but nothing happened. She waited. Seconds felt like hours. Her mind raced with questions. What if no one replied? What if the stranger didn't believe her? What if he found out and got even angrier? Fear and hope tangled together inside her, making it hard to breathe. She wanted to cry, but she forced herself to stay quiet. After what felt like an eternity, her phone vibrated in her hand. Her small fingers shook as she unlocked it. There it was, a message from the stranger. It was short, but it made her heart leap. Are you safe right now? Tell me what's happening. The little girl's eyes widened. They believed her. They wanted to help. She quickly typed back, trying to explain everything without making it worse. She told them where she was hiding, described the sound she had heard, and told them her mother needed help. Her hands were shaking so badly that it took several tries to get the words right. The stranger's replies came quickly. Calm and steady. Stay where you are. Don't make a sound. Help is on the way. Can you lock the door to your room? The little girl nodded, even though they couldn't see her. She ran to her room, her bare feet barely making a sound on the floor. She closed the door and pushed her chair against it, her heart thundering in her chest. Every noise outside made her flinch. Every shout made her body freeze in terror. Minutes passed, though it felt like forever. The stranger kept messaging her, asking questions and giving instructions. Is your mother conscious? Can she move? Are there any neighbors you can call for help? The little girl typed back as best as she could, her fingers trembling. She wanted to explain everything, but the fear of being heard by him kept her typing short, quick sentences. Every reply from the stranger gave her a little more courage, small sense that she wasn't completely alone. Finally, she heard the sound of sirens in the distance. Her ears perked up and a small spark of hope ignited inside her. The stranger's messages were constant now, keeping her calm. They're almost there. Just a little longer. You're doing great. Keep hiding. She pressed herself to the floor, trying to make herself smaller, as if making herself invisible could keep her safe until help arrived. She thought about her mother, lying in the living room, hurt and scared. She thought about all the times she had wished she could be brave enough to stop him, to protect her mother, to change everything. She realized now that being brave didn't mean fighting him herself. Being brave meant reaching out, even when she was terrified, even when she felt powerless. Her little heart swelled with a mix of fear and pride. She had done something. She had asked for help, and someone had come. The sirens grew louder, and soon there were voices outside calling for them to open the door. The little girl stayed quiet, holding the phone tightly, waiting for the right moment. The stranger's final message appeared, there at the door. Open it only if it's safe. You did an amazing job. Stay strong. She felt tears slip down her cheeks, not just from fear but from relief. Someone was finally there. Someone who could stop the pain. Someone who could protect them. The door burst open. She saw uniforms, badges, and kind faces. Officers quickly assessed the situation, and she pointed them toward her mother. The man who had been hurting them was confronted and taken away, his shouts replaced by the calm authority of the officers. She stayed close to her mother, holding her hand, feeling the tension slowly lift. For the first time in a long while, she felt safe. The little girl looked down at her phone, the messages still open. She didn't know who the stranger was, and she probably never would. But she knew that person had saved her and her mother's lives. That single act of kindness, that simple decision to respond, had changed everything. She hugged her mother tightly, promising herself she would never forget the courage it took to reach out, in the way one small message could bring hope in the darkest moment of her life. As the emergency responders worked and the chaos slowly faded, she felt a small, quiet strength growing inside her. She had faced fear like no other child should have too, but she had also discovered that bravery didn't always mean fighting. Sometimes, bravery meant asking for help and trusting that someone out there cared enough to answer. And in that moment, she knew that no matter how dark things seemed, there was always a chance for light to find them. After the police had taken the man away, the little girl and her mother were finally able to breathe. Though the tension did not leave their bodies immediately, the mother sat on the couch, her face pale, and tears silently rolled down her cheeks. The girl knelt beside her, holding her hand tightly, trying to communicate all the love and comfort she could through that small touch. She wanted to say something, anything, to make her mother feel safe, but words felt useless. They both had been through something so terrifying that the fear was still clinging to their skin like a shadow. The stranger on the other end of the phone continued to message her, calm and patient, guiding them through the immediate aftermath. Stay with your mother, the messages read. Keep talking to her, reassure her, and tell her she is safe now. Help is on the way to make sure you are both protected. The little girl felt a strange mix of comfort and amazement. A stranger, someone she had never met, had stayed with her in those moments when no one else could. Even now, they were still helping them, making sure the first terrifying hours were handled as carefully as possible. Paramedics arrived soon after, checking the mother for injuries. She had bruises and scratches, but thankfully nothing broken. The little girl watched every movement, her eyes wide, trying to understand what each tool, each test, and each procedure meant. The paramedic spoke softly, explaining that they were going to make sure she was okay and that she had nothing to be afraid of now. The mother tried to smile at her daughter, but her face still trembled with the weight of the day's events. The girl squeezed her mother's hand, silently promising that they would get through this together. As the paramedics worked, social workers arrived. They were quiet but reassuring, asking gentle questions about what had happened. The girl repeated her story slowly, making sure they understood everything she could remember. She talked about the shouting, the hitting, the fear that had filled every corner of their home. The social workers nodded, taking notes, and then spoke softly to the mother, explaining that they would make sure she and her daughter were taken to a safe place. They said that they had shelter arrangements ready, where they could rest, heal, and be protected. Hearing the word safe made the girl's chest feel lighter than it had in months. Once the police and social workers had secured the house and collected all the information, they escorted the mother and daughter to the shelter. The little girl held tightly onto her mother's hand during the ride, never letting go. The streets whizzed by, and she looked out the window, feeling a mixture of fear, relief, and curiosity. She had never been outside like this after such an event. Everything seemed too bright, too fast, but it was also full of possibility. For the first time in a long while, she thought maybe they could have a new beginning. When they arrived at the shelter, they were greeted by staff who welcomed them warmly. The girl clung to her mother, unsure of what to expect. The rooms were small but clean, with soft beds and blankets. There were toys for children and books lining the walls. A kind woman knelt beside her, introduced herself, and explained that they would be there for as long as needed, that she could ask for anything and no one would turn her away. The little girl nodded, feeling the tension in her shoulders slowly ease as they settled into the room. The little girl's phone buzzed again. The stranger's message appeared. "I'm so glad you are safe. You did exactly the right thing. I'm proud of you." The girl stared at the message for a long moment. Pride was not a word she often associated with herself, but reading it made her chest swell with a feeling she had almost forgotten. Someone out there believed in her bravery, even when she had felt powerless and small. That night, the little girl lay beside her mother in the small bed, listening to the sounds of the shelter. There were other children crying, some laughing softly, and occasional footsteps in the hallway. She felt nervous at first, but the presence of her mother and the knowledge that they were protected gave her a strange comfort. She thought about the stranger who had stayed with her in messages, guiding her, calming her, and giving her instructions. She wondered who they were, why they cared so much, and if they would ever know how much they had changed her life. The thought made her smile faintly. Even through the exhaustion and fear, the next morning, the little girl woke up before her mother. Sunlight streamed through the small window, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of normalcy. The staff brought breakfast and quietly encouraged her to eat. She took small bites, her mind still replaying every detail of the previous day. Her mother slept, finally exhausted from crying and tension, and the girl felt a responsibility to stay alert, to be strong. She did not want to wake her mother unnecessarily, but she also wanted to be ready for anything. After breakfast, a counselor arrived to speak with the mother and daughter together. They talked about what had happened, how they were feeling, and what they could do to recover. The counselor emphasized that they were no longer alone, that there were people who would stand by them, protect them, and help them heal. The little girl listened intently, trying to absorb every word. It was strange to hear adults talk about protection and safety in a calm voice, as if these concepts were natural. But she realized that this was exactly what she had been missing for so long. Over the next few days, the little girl began to explore the shelter cautiously. She found other children her age, some quiet, some loud, all with their own stories of fear and hope. She felt a strange connection with them, realizing that she was not the only one who had suffered, and that they could help each other feel a little safer. She even shared a smile with a few, something she hadn't done in a long time. The warmth of human connection was slowly seeping back into her life. Meanwhile, the mother began to work with the social workers to understand the legal and protective steps she needed to take. They discussed restraining orders, counseling, and long-term planning. The little girl listened from a small distance, understanding that her mother was planning to keep them safe, to take control of the parts of life that had felt so chaotic. She felt a sense of empowerment for her mother, and by extension, for herself. She realized that even though they had been through horror, they now had tools and people to protect them. Throughout this time, stranger continued to check in through messages. They asked how the mother and daughter were doing, offered support, and guided them in small ways. Each message reminded the little girl that there were people in the world who could care for her, who could listen, and who could act to make a difference. This knowledge planted a seed of hope, something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope that they could rebuild, hope that fear did not have to dominate their lives, and hope that kindness could exist even in the darkest situations. The little girl spent her days reading, drawing, and slowly participating in the small activities organized by the shelter. Every moment of engagement, every small laugh, felt like a tiny victory. She began to sleep a little better, eat a little more, and even speak her thoughts aloud, not just in whispered sentences to herself. The constant fear that had once defined her life was beginning to loosen its grip. Each small step forward felt monumental. One evening, as the girl and her mother sat together in the common area, she reflected on how far they had come in just a few days. They were safe, they were together, and they had people who cared for them. The thought of the stranger who had responded to her text sent a wave of gratitude through her. She knew that someone out there had changed the course of their lives with a simple act of kindness. And she promised herself that she would remember this lesson forever, that reaching out, even when it seemed impossible, could lead to hope and safety. The little girl hugged her mother tightly that night, whispering promises to stay brave, to keep hoping, and to protect the new life they were starting to build. They had survived the worst, and now, step by step, they would heal together. The stranger had been the spark, but the mother's strength and their love for each other would carry them forward. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by the soft hum of the shelter, the little girl felt a glimmer of peace, a rare and precious feeling that she would cling to as they moved toward a safer, brighter future. Days turned into weeks, and the little girl and her mother slowly began to settle into life at the shelter. Each morning was a quiet reminder that they were no longer alone, no longer trapped in a house filled with fear. The mother started meeting regularly with counselors and social workers, discussing everything from her past experiences to plans for the future. The little girl listened carefully, absorbing the information, and started to understand that the world outside their old home could be safe, and that she and her mother were allowed to live without constant fear. The shelter staff were kind and gentle, making sure the girl had space to feel safe and learn how to trust again. She found herself exploring the small library, flipping through colorful storybooks that transported her to different worlds. Reading gave her a sense of control, a break from the chaos she had endured. Every page she turned felt like a step away from the memories that haunted her, and each story reminded her that good things could happen. Even after terrible events, the mother worked closely with her social worker to navigate the legal process. There were meetings with police officers, lawyers, and advocacy workers who explained restraining orders and court procedures. The little girl sometimes sat quietly nearby, watching her mother speak with determination and courage. She saw a side of her mother she had rarely noticed before, strong, resilient, and willing to fight for their safety. It inspired her in ways she couldn't fully describe. Meanwhile, the little girl's life slowly started to regain some semblance of normalcy. She met other children at the shelter who had experienced difficult times as well. At first, she was hesitant, unsure how to interact without fear, but the other children welcomed her with smiles and gentle conversation. They played games, shared stories, and slowly built a community of trust. The little girl realized that while her past could not be erased, she could create new, positive experiences that would shape her future. The stranger who had responded to her message remained in the background, checking in occasionally through phone messages. Their words were always calm and supportive. "Keep going," one message read. "You and your mother are doing the right thing. I'm proud of you both." Reading these words became a small daily ritual, a reminder that someone had believed in her when she felt powerless. It reinforced her courage and helped her believe in the possibility of a brighter future. One afternoon, the mother received news that the court case against the abuser was progressing. She explained to her daughter that he would no longer be able to contact them, and that legal protection would ensure they could live safely. The little girl felt a wave of relief wash over her. Fear had dominated her life for so long, but now she could imagine a life without constantly looking over her shoulder. She hugged her mother tightly, feeling hope seep into her heart. As part of the healing process, the little girl attended a group therapy session for children who had faced similar situations. At first she was nervous, unsure how to express her feelings. But as the session went on, she realized that everyone there understood her in ways adults could not. She shared small fragments of her experiences, and when others listened and nodded with empathy, she felt validated. For the first time, she felt that her fear and pain were recognized, and that it was okay to have them. She also learned techniques to manage anxiety, breathing exercises, and ways to calm herself when memories of the past resurfaced. The mother also attended adult counseling, and sometimes shared what she learned with her daughter in gentle ways. They started creating routines together, small acts of normalcy that made life feel safer. Breakfasts were eaten without fear, evenings were spent reading or drawing, and bedtime became a time for comfort and reassurance instead of anxiety. These routines, simple as they were, became the building blocks of healing. One day, the little girl received a note from the shelter staff about a community event designed to empower survivors. The event would include storytelling, activities for children, and guidance for parents. At first, she hesitated. Meeting strangers, even in a safe space, felt overwhelming. But her mother encouraged her gently, reminding her that taking part in positive experiences could help her regain confidence. They attended together, and the girl was amazed at the warmth of the people there. She realized that there were many who had survived, healed, and now wanted to help others do the same. Seeing this gave her courage and a sense of belonging she had not known for years. During the event, the little girl noticed a small corner set aside for children to write letters to someone who had helped them. She immediately thought of the stranger who had answered her text months ago. Though she didn't know who they were, she wanted to express her gratitude. She took a piece of paper and carefully wrote, "Thank you for saving me and my mom. You gave us hope when we had none." She folded the letter, imagining that it might somehow reach the person who had made such a difference in her life. Writing it gave her a sense of closure, and for the first time in a long time, she felt that she had control over a piece of her story. As weeks passed, the little girl and her mother began to plan their next steps. They were determined to move into their own home as soon as possible, a place where they could rebuild their lives and create safety and stability. The process involved applications, interviews, and careful planning, but the mother approached it with determination. The little girl watched her mother navigate this world of paperwork and appointments, feeling inspired and reassured that they were moving forward. Meanwhile, the girl's confidence continued to grow. She started participating in activities at school and at the shelter, slowly engaging with peers and learning to trust people again. Each small interaction, each moment of shared laughter, was a victory over the fear that had once consumed her. She learned that the world was not entirely defined by pain, and that kindness and empathy still existed. One quiet evening, she and her mother sat together, reflecting on their journey so far. They spoke about the stranger who had helped them, about the shelter staff, the social workers, and the friends they had made. The girl realized how many people had contributed to their safety and healing, and she felt a deep sense of gratitude. She also understood that their journey was not over, but the foundation for a safer, happier life had been laid. Together, mother and daughter promised to face the future with courage, hope, and the knowledge that they were stronger than they had ever imagined. The little girl thought about the days ahead and felt a growing sense of excitement. She imagined learning new things, making new friends, and exploring the world without fear. The memory of that first terrifying day lingered, but it no longer controlled her. Instead, it reminded her of her bravery, her mother's strength, and the power of kindness from even a stranger. And in that quiet moment, she understood that while the past shaped them, it did not define them. The future was theirs to shape, and for the first time in a long while, she looked forward to it with hope. Life at the shelter continued to become a steady rhythm for the little girl and her mother. Each day began with small, comforting routines that had once been unimaginable in their old life. The mornings were now filled with the smell of breakfast, laughter from other children, and the quiet encouragement of the staff who had become a support system they could trust. The little girl began to feel the walls of fear and anxiety slowly lifting, placed by a sense of safety and control over her own life. The mother was steadily gaining confidence as well. She met regularly with her counselor and social worker, learning how to advocate for herself and her daughter and how to make decisions that prioritized their well-being. She had begun documenting incidents from the past, preparing for court proceedings, and understanding the legal protections available to her. For the first time, she felt like she had tools to protect herself and her child. Instead of living in constant vulnerability, the little girl started attending more structured programs at the shelter, designed to help children heal from trauma. Art therapy became one of her favorite activities. She painted pictures of bright, happy scenes, trees, flowers, and families enjoying time together. Each brushstroke felt like a tiny reclaiming of her childhood, a way to express feelings she didn't yet have words for. Through art, she learned that it was okay to feel joy and hope even after experiencing so much fear. Sharing her artwork with other children at the shelter helped her connect and make friends. Giving her the confidence to open up gradually, schoolwork became a source of comfort as well. The little girl started attending classes again, supported by a teacher who understood her situation and worked closely with the shelter. Learning gave her a sense of normalcy and control. The routine of going to school, completing assignments, and interacting with classmates reminded her that her life could be ordinary even after extraordinary trauma. It was a slow process, but she began to see that the world outside her fears could be welcoming and supportive. One afternoon, the mother received a call from her lawyer about the upcoming court hearing. She explained to the little girl that the abuser would appear in court and that they would present evidence to ensure their safety was legally recognized. The little girl felt a flutter of nervousness, but also a growing sense of courage. She had survived fear and uncertainty, and now she would witness her mother take a stand to protect them permanently. The shelter staff helped them prepare for the court visit. They explained what would happen, who they would see, and how to stay safe and calm throughout the process. The little girl learned breathing techniques and simple strategies to manage anxiety, and her mother reassured her that they were doing this together. The support of the staff and social workers made the experience less intimidating, and the mother's determination inspired the girl to feel strong as well. The day of the court hearing arrived. The little girl held her mother's hand tightly as they entered the building. It was large and imposing, with high ceilings and echoing voices. The mother spoke with the court officers and lawyers, while the little girl stayed close, listening and observing. She realized how serious and official everything was, and yet she also felt proud. Her mother was standing up for them, ensuring that they would never have to live in fear again. This realization gave the girl a sense of empowerment she had never experienced before. The hearing was long, filled with questions, testimonies, and careful explanations. The little girl stayed quiet, but her presence was powerful. Seeing her mother speak calmly and confidently reassured her that they were not alone and that justice was being pursued. When the hearing ended with a protective order in place, the little girl felt a sense of relief wash over her. She had survived the worst moments of her life, and now the law stood on their side, providing a shield of security. Returning to the shelter, they felt lighter than they had in months. The little girl spent the evening recounting the day to her mother, who listened patiently, proud of her daughter's courage. They hugged, cried, and shared quiet laughter. It was a moment of connection and reassurance, a reminder that they had each other and that together they could face whatever came next. The following weeks were filled with small victories. The little girl began to engage more with her peers at the shelter, sharing stories, playing games, and learning to trust again. She developed friendships that brought her comfort and joy, slowly replacing the isolation and fear that had once dominated her life. Her mother continued to work with counselors, creating a life plan that included finding a permanent home, securing stable employment, and building a safe environment for her daughter. During this time, the stranger who had first responded to the little girl's text remained a quiet presence through occasional messages. They offered encouragement, checked on their well-being, and reminded them that they were not alone. The girl treasured these messages, feeling that the stranger's faith in her bravery had never wavered. Their guidance had sparked a journey that had led them to safety, and the girl's gratitude never diminished. As the mother and daughter prepared to transition out of the shelter and into their own home, they reflected on their journey. Every step, from that first desperate message to the protective order, had been a struggle, but it had also been a testament to resilience, courage, and the power of reaching out for help. They had learned that fear could be confronted, that hope could grow, and that kindness from even a stranger could change lives. The day they moved into their new home was quiet and full of emotion. The little girl explored every corner, touching the walls, looking out the windows, imagining the memories they would create there. It was a space of safety and freedom, a place where they could build a life free from fear. Her mother unpacked carefully, creating small routines that would ground them in this new beginning. The little girl felt a sense of pride and ownership over this space, a tangible representation of their survival and strength in the evenings. They would sit together, recounting the events of the past months, acknowledging their fears, their pain, and their victories. The little girl began to understand that their journey was ongoing, that healing was a process, and that every day offered an opportunity to grow stronger and more resilient. She felt the weight of past trauma lifting gradually, replaced by hope, courage, and the certainty that they were safe. As they settled into their new life, the little girl looked back on the stranger who had answered her text. She realized that the kindness of someone she had never met had set the course for everything that followed. It was a reminder that help could come from unexpected places, and that bravery and compassion often made all the difference. She promised herself that one day she would pay that kindness forward, helping someone else in need. Just as she had been helped when she needed it most, the little girl and her mother were no longer defined solely by fear or trauma. They were defined by their resilience, their courage, and the love that bound them together. They had survived unimaginable pain, found safety, and were now building a future filled with hope and possibility. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had also been a powerful testament to the human spirit, proving that even in the darkest moments, courage, compassion, and connection could light the way to a brighter tomorrow. The little girl woke up in her new room, sunlight streaming through the window, feeling the softness of a bed that was all her own. It was a strange but comforting sensation. For so long, she had woken up in fear, unsure if the day would bring chaos or violence. Now, she could open her eyes and see safety and warmth, and it filled her with a quiet joy she had almost forgotten. Her mother was already awake, moving around the kitchen, making breakfast, and humming softly. The girl padded downstairs, her bare feet touching the warm floor, and hugged her mother tightly. It was a simple act, but it carried a depth of relief and love that words could not capture. Life in their new home was not without challenges. It was filled with small victories and moments of normalcy. The mother and daughter worked together to create routines that brought structure and comfort. Breakfasts were eaten together without fear. Days were filled with school, work, or activities, and evenings were spent reading or drawing. The girl found that routines gave her a sense of control she had never experienced before. She could plan, she could act, she could enjoy the small pleasures of life without looking over her shoulder. School was both a challenge and a joy. The little girl had to navigate social interactions, catch up on lessons she had missed, and adjust to a learning environment that required focus and confidence. Some days were difficult. She struggled to concentrate or felt anxious during recess. But slowly, she began to engage with her classmates, joining in games and conversations. The teachers noticed her growing confidence and supported her every step of the way. Each day at school became a small triumph, proof that she could participate in life fully and safely. The mother also began working, finding a job that allowed her to support herself and her daughter while maintaining flexibility for appointments and therapy sessions. She was learning to balance work, parenting, and self-care in a way that was empowering rather than overwhelming. The little girl watched her mother with admiration, seeing a woman who had survived fear and pain and now stood strong, determined to provide a better life for her child. This inspired the girl to push forward, to believe in herself, and to embrace the opportunities that were now open to them. Therapy remained an important part of their lives. The little girl continued attending sessions where she could express her thoughts and feelings freely. She learned strategies to manage anxiety and nightmares, and she practiced articulating her emotions without fear of judgment. Her mother attended adult counseling. Sometimes the two of them shared sessions together, strengthening their bond and learning to communicate openly and safely. These sessions were not easy, but they were essential in helping them rebuild trust, heal emotional wounds, and strengthen their resilience. One afternoon, the little girl found herself writing in a journal. She described the events that had led them to this new chapter, how they had survived fear, and the small victories that had made life brighter. Writing became a way to process emotions, to celebrate progress, and to remember the courage she and her mother had shown. She also wrote letters of gratitude to the stranger who had answered her initial text. She described how that single act of kindness had changed everything, giving them hope and guiding them to safety. Though she did not know if the messages would ever reach that person, writing them gave her a sense of closure and peace. Over time, the little girl's relationships with others grew stronger. She built friendships at school and within the community, learning to trust and rely on others. She also noticed her own capacity for empathy, reaching out to peers who seemed sad or lonely, offering small gestures of kindness. These interactions reminded her that the world could be filled with support and care, and that her experiences, though painful, had given her a deep understanding of compassion. The mother also focused on building a stable and nurturing environment. She organized their home to be safe, orderly, and welcoming. She encouraged her daughter to take part in decorating, organizing, and creating spaces where they both felt secure. They cooked meals together, shared stories from their day, and celebrated even small accomplishments. The little girl felt pride and responsibility in contributing to their home, and these moments strengthened her sense of agency and self-worth. Despite the progress, there were moments when memories of the past resurfaced. Loud noises, arguments, or even certain smells could trigger fear and anxiety. But the little girl and her mother had learned strategies to cope. They practiced deep breathing, safe words, and grounding exercises. They leaned on each other for reassurance, and gradually, these triggers became less overwhelming. Each time they faced a difficult memory or feeling and came through it safely, their confidence and resilience grew stronger. The little girl also developed a sense of purpose and hope for the future. She dreamed of helping others, inspired by the stranger who had once helped her. She imagined a time when she could reach out to someone in need, offering the same kindness and support that had saved her life. This vision motivated her to continue growing, learning, and embracing life fully. Holidays and special occasions became opportunities for joy and connection. The mother and daughter celebrated birthdays, achievements, and milestones, with small gatherings and traditions. Each celebration reinforced their sense of belonging, love, and security. The little girl learned to experience happiness without fear, to treasure moments of laughter and warmth, and to understand that life could hold beauty even after trauma. Community support played a vital role as well. Friends, neighbors, and school staff offered encouragement, guidance, and friendship. The little girl began to see that they were not alone in the world, that there were people who cared, and that reaching out for help was not a sign of weakness, but of courage. These relationships reinforced the lessons she had learned at the shelter. Trust, kindness, and support could create powerful change. As months passed, the little girl and her mother reflected on their journey. They had survived fear and abuse, reached out for help, and built a foundation for a safer, happier life. They had experienced trauma, but they had also discovered resilience, love, and the power of human connection. Each step forward, no matter how small, was a triumph. The little girl often thought about the stranger who had answered her text on that terrifying day. She understood now that their response had set in motion a chain of events that had saved her and her mother. It was a reminder that, even in the darkest moments, acts of kindness could make an enormous difference. She promised herself that she would carry this lesson forward, offering help, compassion, and hope to others whenever possible. Their lives continued to grow richer with time. The little girl thrived in school, developed deep friendships, and engaged in hobbies and activities that brought her joy. Her mother flourished in her work, established a supportive community, and created a home filled with love and security. Together, they navigated challenges, celebrated successes, and built a future shaped by resilience and hope. Looking back, the little girl realized how far they had come, from a desperate text and fear to finding safety, healing, and a home filled with love. Their journey had been extraordinary. She understood that life could still hold difficulties, but she now had the tools, support, and inner strength to face them. The courage, compassion, and kindness they had received along the way had changed their lives forever, and in that quiet, comforting understanding, the little girl and her mother embraced the life they had fought for, ready to face the future together. They were no longer defined by fear or past trauma, but by their bravery, love, and resilience. The journey had been long and hard, but it had led them to safety, hope, and a new beginning, proving that even in the darkest moments, light, courage, and human kindness could prevail.